This podcast is brought to you by Best at Sea Tours and by Sheets.com, who remind you that a great night's sleep begins with a great set of sheets. And here now is the guru of the seas, Tom Drake, with his special guest, John Dull from Kravet Incorporated.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode. Work on your diction, moron. Another episode of The Guru Learns. Real quick, this came about because a few weeks ago, I interviewed one of the sponsors of my other podcast, called the Daily Cruise and Travel News Podcast, and he has a company called Sheets.com, and we spent a half an hour talking about sheets. And the reviews, when the feedback was, wow, I learned about sheets I never knew. And after that, I interviewed a star from the West End. I interviewed a star from Nashville. And joining me on the program today, because we learned about sheets, and I thought, well, let's learn about fabrics. The gentleman joining us, his career was with Kravet. Now, this is the curveball. I didn't tell John. I used my friend Chat GPT so I could sound professional. And for the people from Kravet listening, I'm really usually a little crazy as a comedian. And I was shocked to read that Kravet is a fifth-generation family-owned business, which is very rare in an industry dominated by conglomerates. It transformed from a small trimming fabric shop for wealthy New Yorkers into a global home furnishings powerhouse, distributing fabrics, upholstery, furniture, wall coverings, carpets, and accessories for interiors around the world. Then it goes on to name the brands that you now own, and also the expansion into the cruise industry. And the gentleman that's joining us, his name is John Dull. I've known him for many, many years. He was a guest on Oceana, and we became friends. He started in the business right out of college, out of Baruch College. Am I correct? I got it.
Wow, you did your homework. That's unusual for you.
Out of Baruch College, and has had an unbelievable career where he was the executive vice president, director of sales, and then help establish Kravet as a powerhouse in the cruise industry, because more and more in the industry that I've been in forever, they focus on design, they focus on quality, they focus on fabrics. We welcome to the program my pal John Dull. Thank you, John, for being here.
Oh, you're welcome, but I don't know what the hell you need me for. You've just done it all.
Well,
good job.
I'll tell you what I need you for. Let's talk about this. We met a long time ago, not at a bar. It was during the captain's cocktail party. We were just sitting on a couch having a drink, and people were walking by wondering if we were a couple. And I don't know where Annette was at the time, but let's start with the story. You're now an executive vice president of Kravet, and you are in one of your showrooms in Davie, Florida. And you kind of help out one of your salespeople with a customer with many. I set it up, but you tell the rest of the story. It's a great story.
All right. So I was going to talk about how I got there to begin with. Let's go right to 2010 in Florida.
Okay.
I guess you just want this to be short. That's the situation.
We'll back up.
You got to go sell a solo or something.
We'll back up.
The bottom line is, so I'm traveling to Florida. I'm executive vice president of sales of Kravet. I travel with salespeople. I work in showrooms, and I'm in a showroom. I'm walking around looking at customers, trying to help. And I see these two ladies, and these two ladies must have had 300 samples in their arms. And one of the ladies is pregnant. So I walked over to them and I said, hi, I'm John Dull, executive vice president of Kravet. What are you working on? You need some help. And they were so gracious. And the one lady says, my name is Masha Del Rio. And that rang a bell, because 2 or 3 weeks later, Annette and I and our friends were going on a cruise, and it was on Regent, and we were going to Alaska. And I said, so what are you working on? Well, we're building a new ship. I said, for Oceana or Regent? I think she was impressed that I actually knew. And she said, Oceana. I said, Marina? She said, yeah. How'd you know? I said, well, I did a little homework. I love cruising. And I said, Del Rio. I said, are you somehow connected to Frank Del Rio? Oh, yeah, he's my husband. I said, really? Okay. Yeah. Can I have your card? Yeah. And she gave me his card, and Franco's wife, Franco Semerero, who is the senior vice president of operations, still at Oceana and Regent. Yep. I got his card, and they left. And I immediately got on the phone and I called my boss, Carrie Kravet, who is the CEO of Kravet. And I said, Carrie, I don't know if this is going to amount to anything, but I just met somebody who I think give us an opportunity. If I call this guy tomorrow and set up an appointment in Miami to go see him, would you go with me? And he said, finally he said, sure. So Frank Del Rio and I exchanged emails, and probably it was about 4 weeks later, Carrie and I were sitting in Frank's office, and we were talking about the design industry, just like you talked about how cruise ships have now become design oriented. And I believe Frank Del Rio had a lot to do with that, because think of the two things he did with Marina. He brought in Jacques Pepin for food, so people knew him. And for the owner suites, he brought in Ralph Lauren. So that didn't help us. But after we talked and we agreed that we could possibly help them, and he and Marsha would actually be picking the fabrics, we wound up with 32 fabrics, original fabrics on the Marina. And then on top of that, what we did was Frank wanted to do some marketing things. So we had him come to our showroom. We went to some of his inaugurals with Marina. And finally, I think it was November 9th, 2010, we signed an agreement with them that we would represent as a license Oceana Cruises, and we would do 2 outdoor collections. Scott Kravet, Carrie's brother, would do the collection. And so here we are, by chance meeting, and all of a sudden we're working together with Oceana, and it started a great relationship.
And now I will tell you why I went with that to begin with. First of all, so many of the listeners to the podcast are Oceana guests that I've met personally over the years. And I believe they would find that incredible. They've heard the story from me more than once about how it worked out that Kravet became such a big part of Oceana and the design. That's number one. Number two, if anybody wonders how you become the executive vice president of a family-owned company, it's by walking up to 2 women, one of whom was pregnant, carrying 300 fabrics and offering to help. Most people would go, I'll be in the car if you need me. I mean, seriously, they're carrying all these fabrics and you're thinking, should I? And you walked over, and that's how you get. So now that's how you got where you got. But in the beginning, you graduate college. And how did you end up? Did you wake up one day, on the couch, you go on this fabric? No, I got to get better fabric. What happened? How did it begin?
No, I tell you how I woke up one day and I realized I was married and had a son.
Oh, that'll do it.
I needed a job, and I was getting out of college. And college that I was in, Baruch, set up interviews for people. And I had 2. One was with a company called Upjohn. They were a pharmaceutical company. And they offered me a job, and they offered me more money. But the person I met at Schumacher, I went to work for F. Schumacher and Company, and his name was Ed Deal, and we just hit it off. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go with the person that I really like. And I did. I knew absolutely nothing about fabrics, probably less about pharmaceuticals, but I took the job with Schumacher. So I started a training period, worked in the Manhattan showroom. And then they gave me a promotion. I don't know if they wanted to get me away from the Manhattan customers, or so they gave me Queens, Brooklyn, Bronx, and Staten Island. Now here's the kicker. They come to me and said, you can pick up your car at the end of the week. I said, oops. And they said, what's the matter? I said, I don't know how to drive. So here
Really?
I am. Yeah. I was 23 years old, didn't know how to drive, lived in Queens. What the heck? I take a train, take a subway. So 2 weeks later, I got a driver's license. The first week I had the car, I pulled into a gas station, hit a pump. And so that didn't go too well. About 3 or 4 weeks later, I went to visit a couple of customers in the Bronx. I came out with my sample books, and lo and behold, 2 guys are beating on my side view mirrors. So I walked back into the upholstery shop, said to the guy, I'll send you samples, I'll call you. And I think I invented telemarketing in the fabric business, because I never went back.
I'm just going to say that when we ran over a pump and the owner comes out and he's screaming at you, you go, but look at the fabrics. I have some.
Yeah, I had them all back.
Let me do your couch over. We'll call it even. How about that? Now, that was strictly fabrics, not furniture, right? It was strictly fabrics for draperies, those kind of things.
Yeah, but we Kravet also at that time was starting its furniture business, which is a major furniture business. So after I survived the Bronx, et cetera, they offered me another promotion. Memphis. What the heck is in Memphis?
Wow.
Elvis Presley. So Annette and I and our son moved to Memphis. My daughter was born 2 years later in Memphis, Melissa. And my territory was Western Tennessee up to Nashville.
Okay, I have to stop you right there. Is that a lot of you didn't sell velour, did you? No, like the velvet
Schumacher,
velvet Elvis in that area of the country. The quality.
Actually, Elvis's house was done with a lot of red velvet. So it was.
Yeah.
So we had northern Mississippi and Arkansas. Beautiful country, great people. And I got some breaks. The first break I got was the guy I replaced was a bum. He didn't do anything. All I had to do was show up and I would have better sales numbers. The second break I got was Annette got involved. My wife, Annette, took care of customers. She delivered samples to customers. Our customers loved her. And then for the ones that really liked us, they would babysit the kids and Annette would cook them Italian food. In fact, one of them, I wanted to put her into business. The food was so good.
No kidding. Huh?
Yeah.
Southern hospitality.
The third break I got, I'm driving along an avenue in Memphis called Lamar Avenue. And on Lamar Avenue is a company called Innkeeper Supply. And guess what they did? They supplied all of the interiors for Holiday Inns. No one from Schumacher or anybody else have ever called on him from the decorative fabric business. So I met two designers, Tom Wells, you could probably read up on him, and Tom Tomley. And they loved the fact that I lived in Memphis and I was local and I can get them things. And Annette would deliver things to them when I was not there. So the people in New York for Schumacher noticed. All of a sudden, we were getting hotel.
Let me ask you, I'm personally confused now. That was prior to Kravet, right? This was where
right.
you learned the trade. And now,
yes.
Is Schumacher still in business?
Yes, they are.
Pretend I'm dumb. And was it upholstery fabrics? It was drapery fabrics or everything?
Same as Kravet.
Okay. All right.
Same as Kravet.
Thanks.
So then the second break I got was a group of salespeople from competitors just to set up at a hotel room called a Holiday Inn in Vanderbilt in Nashville. And we had this one customer who never showed up, and her name was Jerry Law. And, and I got tired of her not showing up because I thought she really had an opportunity to do some business with us. So I said, to hell with it. I'm going to show up one day in her studio. And I did. And much to my surprise, she sat down with me and she said, I'm working on a project. And Schumacher, I know, has Williamsburg Fabrics and Old Sturbridge Village. I think I might be able to use those fabrics. I said, great, I'll get you both collections. Well, she wound up using both collections. And the project she was working on was the 600-room Opryland Hotel that opened up in 1977.
How about that? Huh?
Yeah, that really got Schumacher's attention. So in 1978, Annette and I were promoted. We moved to Houston. And in 1980, 81, I was promoted to vice president of sales of Waverly. We moved back home. Back home became New Jersey. And that's where we were until 1986, when Laura Ashley came looking and said, we need somebody to start up. And I said to myself, well, a startup, Laura Ashley. But what happened was Laura Ashley was really just retail. They didn't do wholesale very well. So I lasted there about 2 years. And then another company came and talked to me. And this was interesting because it was Greff. Greff was a great company at one time. Also Warner of London. And they were owned or purchased through a series of acquisitions by a company called Blackstone. Yes, the Blackstone. Mm-hmm. And at the time, it was then known as Wicks, not Blackstone, but the one that was running the company. And I met a guy by the name of Jim Burley, who worked for Jack Welch at GE. And I don't know if I've ever learned so much as I learned from that man in 2 or 3 years about running business, revenues, expenses, et cetera. So it was an education. Mm. Okay, so we're finally getting to the point where I'm getting to Kravet. So I was on the road in St. Louis.
Let me ask, the old lawyer thing, never ask a question you don't know the answer to, but the fabrics that for the Opryland, those Schumacher,
Schumacher.
those fabrics all produced in the United States, or they were from other countries?
No, they were all basically prints, and they were all produced in the United States. They were printed in the United States.
What is it? What do you mean by printed?
Printed as opposed to woven. So let me try to explain to you.
This is, by the way, this is where the guru learns. This is where everyone else learns. I don't know about it, of course. What do I know? But there is a difference, and this is like
okay. So when printing is done in this country, it's done by a rotary screen, and that begins with a design that is etched or engraved on a mesh cylinder. Each cylinder screen, picture something rolling and rolling, and it has a different color. Each cylinder has a different color, and the screens rotate. And underneath where the screens are rotating, each with a different color, there is a fabric moving back and forth on the table. And as the screens rotate and drop the color, the design is formed. So it's rotary screen printing. Now, rotary screen printing is probably the most popular because you can do a lot of it and it's not expensive, but it's not woven. There's a difference between a woven fabric and a printed fabric. The difference is a woven fabric is actually woven together. It's patterns that are created by interlacing colored threads. Now, the warp thread is the horizontal thread, so that goes with the weft thread, which is warp thread is vertical and the weft is horizontal. So they interlock, and the design is actually formed by the weaving of the fabric.
Do the high-level designers, for instance, Opulent, they usually don't have a budget, right? I mean, the ones that are commissioned to produce something that's total wow, they have a budget, but they can go to somebody and say, I want this because this is better. So woven is better than print?
Well, it depends on the use, and depends, for instance, a lot of prints are used for draperies. I would say for the cruise industry, more things are used that are wovens as opposed to prints, because better durability, textured looks. Most fabrics are woven on the cruise industry because they also last longer, easily cleanable. And so a lot of designers prefer wovens in the cruise industry as opposed to prints. And some prints will crock, so you won't get as good a wearability as with a woven.
So a layman like me dragged into I was in one of your showrooms actually in Boston at the I call it Black Watch terminal.
Yeah, it's right by the cruise dock.
Yeah, right by the cruise. But a layman like me that goes into one of these designer showrooms and looks at these amazing fabrics, and also looks that they're pretty pricey, but you get what you pay for. The reality is the high level, the ones that cost the most, do that because they're woven and the fabric is a special fabric. I'm just trying to figure out, why things cost what they cost.
Well, it's a good question. It really has to do with when you're a company like Kravet, you actually sell 2 or 3 yards, you sell 14 yards, so it's what's known as a cut order business. So you're buying a specialty fabric. Now, it could be silk, it could be polyester, it could be cotton, it could be linen. It depends on how it's made, what it's made of, how it's treated, and how many yards you need. So somebody like a cruise ship may need 2,000 yards. Well, 2,000 yards to produce is going to cost a hell of a lot less than 6 yards of fabric, onesies.
Right.
So that's why things are more expensive. If you buy it for your house, it's considered a onesie, 10 yards or 12 yards. But you don't have to buy a whole piece and then have it go to waste.
I never asked you your religious background, but I'm assuming that it's not really the shmata business. You're not in the rag business, but you're in the fabrics and things like that. Is it like the garment district? Is it like they call this shmata business? Is it predominantly, are you selling to Jewish people that say, hello, this is what I'm not paying, that this is not a price I'm going to pay for. This is, I know for a fact, this is woven, it was weaving, it was woven, whatever. Aren't you the goyim in an industry or not? Am I wrong with that?
Well, you went into your Jackie Mason shtick, but that's okay. No, we sell to the interior design trade.
Okay.
Decorative fabrics go to the interior
Okay,
designers who are
different.
designing a home.
Yeah.
But it's expanded these days, just like into the cruise industry, just into
Nice
hospitality.
segue. Nice segue. We can go right into that if you want.
Okay, I can go right into the cruise industry. Well, I already told you how we got into it, the cruise industry, but there's one difference, big difference between, let's say, you buying 6 yards of fabric and the cruise industry buying 6 yards of fabric. In order for the cruise industry to buy 6 yards of fabric or any amount of fabrics, it has to be flame retardant.
Yeah.
So there is a situation called IMO, and IMO is the International Maritime Organization, as you know. So in order for the fabrics to pass, it has to go through 2 tests. The first is called the cigarette smoldering test. So an actual lit cigarette is placed on the corner and the back cushion of an upholstered piece of furniture, and it can ignite for 60 minutes. So that means you put a cigarette butt on this, and if it doesn't ignite for 60 minutes, it passes that test. If it does ignite, not only is somebody going to have to put the fire out, but it won't pass the test. The second is called a match test. And it's actually a match isn't used. A gas flame equivalent to a lit match is applied for 20 seconds onto the fabric. And if there's no flaming for 2 minutes, it passes. So any fabrics you see on a cruise ship has to pass these tests. And if they don't, they're not going to pass and they're not going to be put on the cruise ship. That's a big difference.
Who does the testing? It's a certified company?
Yeah, it's certified company. And in fact, some companies like MSC, before you even show them anything, they want to see the certificate.
Right.
So,
and it's a guy, it's a great job. It's a guy that every day, 8 hours a day, he lights a cigarette and sticks it on a piece of fabric and he watches it and he goes, okay, that's good. Next. I'm kidding, of course, comedian sometimes. All right. So now you got into that business, but let's back up. I love backing up. I know I'm supposed to be like a professional interviewer, but let's go back to you left and then you went to Kravet, and that was you were hired then, a lot of pressure. You're going to be what was the title when you joined Kravet? Was it then?
I was the national sales manager, Carrie Kravet, who is the CEO. First of all, the Kravet family, you're right, 5th generation. I went to work starting with the 3rd generation. And you know how you're always talking about the guy from Viking, Torsten Hagen?
Yeah. Torsten Hagen.
Well, our third generation, his name was Larry Kravet, and he was kind of a swashbuckler.
Yeah.
He's just a giant in the industry. And his wife, Yuta, she handled the marketing with their daughter, Ellen. And they were a great team, the way they did the advertising. Then there's Carrie, who married Lisa Kravet, both Harvard lawyers. And they basically ran the company, and Lisa helped start the furniture, and Carrie was involved in everything. And last and not least, Scott Kravet. And Scott Kravet is the guru of the fabric industry. There is not a man on earth who knows more about decorative textiles than Scott Kravet. And I don't think there is a thing he doesn't know about how they're made, where they're made, how much they cost. I mean, Kravet has one of the largest document archives of textiles, wall coverings in the world. And Scott Kravet is the one who put that all together.
I'm reading this from my good friend at Chat, talking about it. Kravet's archival commitment makes it not just a manufacturer, but a custodian of design history, housing textile swatches and documents spanning centuries and making them available to designers, museums, and scholars. This AI thing is pretty unbelievable sometimes. A simple question, please give me the history of the company how many years with Kravet and still there? How many?
I started on December 21st, 1992. And the way that happened was I was on the road in St. Louis, and a customer asked me a question about Kravet. I didn't know the answer. I didn't know the sales manager. I didn't know the salesperson. So what I did was, what the hell? I'll call Carrie Kravet. I don't know him, but I'll say hello. And so
That's by the way, that's very Queens, New York, right there.
Oh yeah,
that's very Queens.
So we exchanged phone numbers, and I think it was about 2 or 3 months later he called me up, and he said, "Do you know a guy by the name of such and such?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "What do you think?" I said, "Well, for what? What you want to hire him? What do you want to do with him?" Well, I'm thinking of taking on some different responsibilities, and I was thinking about him to be the national sales manager. And I said, "Well, I wouldn't hire him. I want you to hire me." And I guess it was about a few months later, after a lot of meetings with all the family, that I was fortunate enough, and the most fortunate thing I've ever done for me and my family, joined Kravet Fabrics.
Yeah.
And I've been there since then. And it's just been a great time going forward.
Now, though, you've transitioned to pretty much repping their cruise line, right? And one of those repping things, is that proper? Or one of the meetings you had recently was with a company that I've talked about extensively on my daily podcast, and that, of course, is Crescent Seas, which, and I will say it here on this podcast, I said it in the other one. Russell Galbert, I don't know the man, but his background is in building and cruise industry. As the CEO of Prestige Cruise Holdings, former parent company of Oceania Region, and then of NCL Holdings, he understands the business. Now, for those people that don't know, they were supposed to acquire 2 ships from NCL Holdings, the Region, Seven Seas Navigator, and the ship that I joined on Sunday, the Oceania Insignia. And for reasons that don't fit in this podcast, they decided to go new. And you are involved with them in terms of all of it, right? Letting people know these are people that know what they're doing. They're not people that pick up an old ship and put lipstick on a pig and try to peddle it for cheap money.
Well, back in April, I read about Russell. I had met him a couple of times. Of course, he'd never know who the heck I was.
Yeah.
And I met him on a couple of inaugurals that Frank Del Rio did. And you just described, obviously, Russell was one of the first investors with Oceania Cruises. And then, as you know, in 2008, it became Prestige when Oceania bought Regent. And then when Frank Del Rio left, Russell became the chairman of the board of NCL in 2018 until 2024. But when I read about Crescent Seas, I said, why don't I send this guy an email and tell him who I am and tell him my story and the Frank Del Rio Oceania situation? Maybe he'll like it. Well, it turns out probably within a day, he sent me an email. He said, "That's a great story." He says, "Why don't you come to Miami?" And so 2 or 3 months later, I came to Miami, and I brought Ian Schwartz, who is the vice president of contract with me, and our great salesperson, Janice Bella. So the 3 of us, and I said to Carrie Kravet, it's one of the best meetings I've ever had. Why? Because there were 3 of us, each of us doing his or her own job. But Russell brought all of his key executives. He had Marissa Marcus, who does marketing. He had Tiffany Alonso from design. He had David Gonzalez, who's in charge of their operations, senior development. And he had just hired a new guy by the name of Thatcher Brown. And Thatcher Brown is the CEO, and he has 25, 26 years experience in the cruise and travel business. And when we started to talking, and my job on this was to talk about the cruise industry. So at the end of the meeting, and it was a great meeting, Thatcher said to me, "Here, I'm going to give you this pin." And it had a little ship. And he says, "I'm going to make you an honorary spokesperson for Crescent Seas since you like what we're doing so much." And I said to myself, wow, that's a nice honor. It's great. But the second thing that came into my mind, I said, for this day only, I outgurued the guru. And I felt so good about that. But anyway, what Russell is doing, going to the new ship, I think it's the smartest thing to do.
Let me stop. we did such a hard left or a hard right, depending on which way it goes. Just to recap a little bit, Crescent Seas is a residence at sea operation that initially was going to use two ships, one 25 years old, one older than that, and put a lot of money into them and redecorate them. And this is crass, but what I call lipstick on a pig. And the reason I thought it would be successful is because they were having professional people from Apollo and from NCL operated for them. So you didn't have to worry about the most important part. What about the food? What about the service? What about the itinerary? But the feedback, according to what I read, they got was, hey, we would rather give you our $8 million on a new one or our $2 million on a new one. We would rather invest. And so that is now the future, if I'm correct, of Crescent Seas going forward. They intend to build exactly what they think the market will go for. Did I speak out of turn?
No, you're smart. They're smart for listening to their customers. The other thing is a ship like the Navigator is 28,600 tons. The new ship they're going to build is 55,000. And what this does for Russell, it gives them a chance to customize it. It gives them the chance to make it bigger. And it also gives them the opportunity to start fresh. And for us, that's a big opportunity because now we can not only be involved with the public spaces of design, but because, as I said before, about 6 yards of fabric, 4 yards of fabric for Kravet, each person who purchases, if they want, could use an interior designer, go through us, go through Russell, and order a piece of furniture. Just one piece, 2 chairs, a rug, 16 rolls of wall covering, 8 yards of fabric. So it gives us an opportunity to be involved with the 280 or so condos that they're building.
You actually got there ahead of me. I wanted to know how many units, whether they're going to call them condos or suites or whatever. There'll be 280. And
I think it's going to be 280, but that may change.
And that market, they're not shopping at Kohl's because there's a cashback. I mean, they have designers, but they could use your designers. And speaking of designers, we'll segue in another area. There's a very popular one that
Before you do that,
okay,
just let me say one thing.
Okay, go ahead.
It's
your interview.
When I Googled Russell, I didn't realize Crescent Heights is who they are. I mean, I think they've been in business 39, 40 years. They are huge. He is so damn successful with the development in real estate, the condos, the high rises, and everything else. I mean, I think there's also a great opportunity to help them with that part of the business. He just finished a building called 5 Park that he's actually taking an apartment in, and he's using some of our fabric wall covering. And he's so successful. I can't see how whatever he's going to do is not going to be successful. That's why I would bet on Crescent Seas.
Which is what I said, but I also said this. Why? That business. I've been in the business for 30 years, the cruise industry. Now, that's different, but why? You're a successful developer. You got buildings all over Miami. Why? But you know what? Everybody has something they want to keep doing. So.
And he loves the cruise industry. Otherwise, why would he have invested in, and why would he be the champion?
I agree. I absolutely agree. So, what I was leading up to prior to that was about the young, new, fresh interior designers who have also latched on to the cruise industry as a market, as opposed to whether it be hotels or penthouses or $1 million apartments. And one in particular you've worked with quite a bit, and that's Studio Dado out of Miami. And I don't know if they're particularly young, but their ideas are fresh and new and young, and they're very much sought after. Is that the right word? Sought after.
Frank Del Rio hired Studio Dado in November of 2016. 4 gentlemen, Johandro Ruiz, Javier Cali, George Mesa, and Greg Walton. Greg just retired. But the 3 of them combined, their first ship to do was the Navigator. They did the refurb, and then they did the Encore for NCL. But today, they are probably the most famous design firm in the cruise industry in the United States. And the cruise show was just taking place in Hamburg, Germany, and they were nominated for 5 awards, 4 from Oceana Allure and 1 from Aqua, NCL Aqua. And of course, one of them is your wife's favorite restaurant, my wife's favorite restaurant, Red Ginger on Oceana, was up for a nomination for an award. So Studio Dado is also expanding into land-based hospitality. So they are on the mark, and the things they do are absolutely incredible. And they're all good guys.
But there are facets of the cruise industry. I say this in my podcast all the time because the industry gets beat up sometimes because they're not based in the United States, yada, yada, yada. But the billions of dollars in revenue that they generate every year by purchasing from all of the purveyors and by the buses and by the ticket takers and all those people, and now in the fashion industry, the design industry, it's a whole market that keeps exploding, literally exploding, as they build more ships and better fabrics and one. But you schooled me the other day. We haven't talked about this. I always comment about the chairs on ships are so low to the ground because our demographics, if they fall out, it's easier for them to crawl back in again. But you schooled me, and they weigh. I think the Oceana Insignia is 30,000 tons. Without the chairs, it's about 6,000 tons. They are the heaviest to try to move, and they're the lowest to the ground. And you told me why. You actually quite bluntly straightened me out.
Yeah, well, they're low to the ground because the center of gravity is important. And the way the ships move, you get a wave, you move the wrong way, it's a long fall. Or maybe you've had a rough night, too many Zambucas. If you were on a high chair, you fall right off. This way the chair's low, you don't have to worry about getting hurt.
Or trying to move it. And I know you love those guys from Studio Dado, but boy, oh boy, they redid the martinis and try to move one of those chairs. I have to get two guys from India and two from the Philippines, and five of us, we can move it about 6 inches. But you know what? You're right. If the ship lists left or right, the guest is laying on the floor, but the chair hasn't moved an inch. It's tremendous. But you were Kravet. I'm looking at this as my friend ChatGPT. There are other brands. By the way, if you're first time listener to this, the Guru Learns, I ask questions the way I think, which is erratic. But I'm reading over here that Kravet not only isn't Kravet, it's Lee Joffa. Do I have that right?
Yeah, Lee Joffa was purchased by Kravet in 1995, and it's more of a traditional company than Kravet was. In 2001, Kravet purchased J.P.&J. Baker. Yeah. In 2011, they purchased Brunswick and Fiat, French company, and then recently they purchased Donghia, which was an Italian company. So they have 5 brands, but not only do they have 5 brands, they also have companies we represent, like MDC Wall Covering, and we also license things like to people like Candace Olson. And by the way, Candace Olson did the Princess bed. The luxury bed, and she used our fabrics. They were her fabrics.
Now help me out because I can tell you who Jackie Mason is, but I don't know who Candace Olson is. She's a famous designer. She's had her own network TV show. She's just a great designer, well known in the retail and wholesale end of things. She designs things that are easy to live with, good looking. And that's why one of the reasons Princess did a license with her, because of her name as well. Let me ask a very constructive question, or the answer would be someone goes out with a designer looking at fabrics. Are things like durability, they enter into it? I know for the cruise industry, is that a question that comes up? Like you have the outdoor fabrics by the waves out there, right? They have to stand the test of time, so to speak. Are they special weaves or special designs or special fabric, or how do you answer those questions?
Well, take a look at what the cruise industry is using today. Sure, durability is important. This is why they use a lot of vinyls. Vinyls are made out of plastic, and the chloride in the vinyl gives it flammability situations where it's anti-flammable, and so that's an important aspect. And yes, a lot of fabrics are treated because for instance, if you got kids and you're working with an interior designer and you don't want, things are going to get spilled, so you treat the fabrics. So durability, cleanability, all of that plays an important part, not only in the home, but in the cruise industry as well.
Now I have another question. When you said treated,
I'm going to stop talking. You're asking too many questions.
I bought new glasses, and the lenses were this, but then did I want this? Did I want the non-glare? Okay, give me the non-glare. Did I want the one where it changed color, during the day? And I said, sure, give me. When a cruise line orders fabric, is it all inclusive, or do you want the special treatment? Do you want do you upsell that, or it's just this is the price?
Remember, it's got to pass IMO, and that's a key component, and what cruise lines look for. So there's no chance of fire on board. That's a key. Tom, if you take a cruise line like Disney, I mean, we do a lot of business with Disney on land, and they'll come to us with a theme. And Disney will do things like they want specialty things because of Kravet having all of these documents. We can do just about anything. They can help design it. We can design it for them. So the bottom line on all of this is, you get requests for anything and you make it. And cruise lines can do the same thing. We just did a pillow. I'm going to tell you, we did a pillow for somebody. I won't say who it was. We worked with a couple of designers, and here's what they came to me with. We want a pillow that is 18 by 18, has an insert. The fabric has to be washable. It has to have a zipper. And by the way, we need it under such and such a pillow. I says, you got to be kidding me. Well, I worked with our person who's in charge of our fabricated products, Patty Phelan. She did a great job sourcing it. And so there's 3,500 pillows going on one. It just went on one ship, 3,500 going on another. And that's the way it works. So you can actually work things with the cruise line when they ask. And that's the best way to do it because it gives it to them exclusively.
And I will tell people listening, this is why I find this stuff very interesting. John and I had conversations, tells me stories, and I find that part of the business very interesting. But now you started out of Baruch College. I just wanted to say it one more time. And you traveled in the South, and you went out to Texas, and then you got back to New York, and you were a big part of a 5-generation family, and you're still doing it. You're still out there finding pillows for people. You're still you're meeting with Russell Galvin. Now you're a little bit involved with that operation. You still have energy and passion. You still, when John and I would sit and talk, and he would tell me these stories about this name and that name, I'm like, that's really cool. One of the reasons I asked him to kindly do this, of course, I had to set topics here, and I didn't purposely do that because I want to think like somebody listening. Why do you keep doing it? Why not? I know.
Why not? What am I going to do? Stay home and twiddle my thumbs? And it's not all that crazy compared to what I used to do. I love the cruise industry. I read all I can. I cruise as often as I can. And anything that I can pick up and anything I can do to help Kravet do some more business in an area that they may not have been doing as much business, I'm going to do it as long as I'm healthy and my wife is healthy. Why not? What the hell are you going to do? Sit home?
Good for you. I tell people all the time your story, and I mentioned Kravet, and most people are quite familiar with the name, and other people are not. And I tell them, you need to buy better fabric. Where are you going? Where are you going to Mike's? What is it called? Michael's? That's the point being. You still work for a fabulous. They might be listening. Maybe they want to advertise on my other podcast. You work for a fabulous, and you tell great stories because you're from New York. What do you mean? So, all right. Well, anything else you wanted to cover that I stepped all over during the course of this podcast? Did we?
No, I think we covered it all. I hope I was a little bit educational. I know a lot of people have problems when it comes to the fabrics and how they're made, and they really don't care. They just want them to look great, and all the Kravet fabrics look great. They want them to wear great. All the Kravet fabrics wear great. So, yeah. I think you did a great job. and I appreciate the opportunity to.
Oh, I'm thrilled, but I
about
will tell you, it's intimidating. The fabric business, when we were looking, and we ended up not doing it. We were redoing the back of our house, which is all windows, with drapes, and we were in your showroom. We ended up with from the the people, the shade store with all motor.
We work with the shade store,
Okay, there you
Tom.
go. There you go.
I sent you to the shade
Oh, that's
store,
right, yeah.
Tom. Come on, you're getting old.
No, I didn't get a discount either. But anyway, so I have all motorized
You got
shades.
10 off.
Maybe I did motorized shades, but the reality is the whole concept of shopping is so mind-boggling. It's like when you're in Turkey and the guy wants to sell you a rug and you don't know whether you're getting a good rug or a bad rug. So now you know. Go to Kravet, go to the brands that Kravet markets, because people like you are behind that brand. And not only that, 5 generation, you could take 2 seconds and talk about the passion they all have for this business. And they don't sell junk, do they? They don't know what that means.
No, and it starts with
they could.
It starts with not only the passion but the love that they have of the business, and they've been doing it so long, but doing it exceptionally well, and that's the key. And they have so much pride in what they do that they're just going to keep doing it and doing it well because you're dealing with interior designers who really know what they're doing. And if you ask them to name one company that they love to deal with, it's Kravet. And because we have more variety than anybody in the world, and we're a great customer service team.
And the great part about this whole story is it began because you were getting out of college and you had a wife. And was Annette pregnant at the time, or you had a son?
We had a son. Brad was born. Yeah. In fact, our daughter was born in Memphis 2 years later.
And then
1975.
It expanded from traditional fabrics designers into the cruise industry, because you walked up to 2 ladies, one of whom was pregnant. There's a lot of, I don't know, synergy there, or similar stuff. There were children involved in your career. So,
well, I tell you what was involved is, and the same thing with my note to Russell Galbert. What's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
You got to take a chance, and you got to ask for the order. And when the customer says no, you got to start selling.
That is a separate podcast, because I am the world's worst closer. I was a salesman for Chevron Chemical Company, Carnation Company, Mutual New York. I was just what you described. I was the guy that didn't ask for the order. And I was a terrible closer because I was afraid to ask. I was afraid they would say no. And you taught me that. You say, well, then you just move on. And I've told this story many times. When I was with Mutual New York, I would make cold calls every day for people to try to get an appointment to sell them life insurance. I would make 300 calls a month, and 300 people would hang up on me. And the rejection was so bad, I became a comedian. And then I put 300 people in the room, and they all reject me at the same time. And we go to the bar, and it works out much better. But the ability to keep asking that's another separate podcast. The gift of being able to ask for the order and then get the order.
And taking a chance and not giving up.
That's it right there. Taking a chance. And thank you, John. I hope I did you a good service, and that I wasn't too erratic in the I hope I asked the right questions. I'm not Phil Donahue yet.
No, but you did a great job, and I really, really appreciate the opportunity, because maybe a couple of your listeners who probably can afford Kravet will say, hey, we're going to redo our house and we're going to put some fabric on our furniture, and it's going to be Kravet. So for that, I thank you.
Now you just reopened the door, though. That's a great, what you just said. Someone's listening, and you know what? I know one in particular, and said, I've listened to John talk about Kravet. I've listened to talk about the 5-generation company and their passion. How do I do it? Do you just find a designer and say, I want Kravet, or you can't just call Kravet? You don't recommend designers or anything at the company, right? You go.
Yeah, I mean, we could steer the person in the right direction, but when all else fails, call John Doe.
Okay. You be careful what you ask for.
That's all right. I wouldn't mind have 20,000 listeners that you have calling me and saying, I need 17 yards of fabric.
Well, I'll make sure they do. because you deserve
Okay.
it. You're the best. Thank you. And
Thank you.
I love doing that too. He has a great wife. His wife, she's the best. And that's
Thank
another
you, Frank.
another
Best to Dottie.
podcast another time. See you, pal.
Okay.
Thanks.
See ya.
See
Bye.
you later. Bye-bye.